One common question that I get is how to strategically fill the gap on your farm of flowers from your spring bulbs to your summer annuals, often called the June gap or the May gap, whatever that is for your region. This is kind of the awkward stretch where things stop blooming before your summer annuals start blooming, and it can be difficult to have a consistent supply of flowers during that early summer time frame, late spring kind of time frame. But the good news is there are things that you can do to strategically plan to overcome that gap and work toward having a good supply of flowers during that gap as well. Hi, I'm Ruth Ann from Abundant Bloom Flower Farm, Indoor, Michigan. Welcome back. I'm going into my 7th year of flower farming, and I have about an acre in production, and I sell almost exclusively to florists. So that's kind of how I crop plan and view my whole farm of production toward that sales outlet. I also teach flower farmers through my course, Selling Flowers to Florists, which welcome to the 50 new members to the course. I'm so glad you're in the course. And I teach other educational resources to flower farmers as well. And I'm so glad you're here. So today we're going to be talking about this June gap. That's what I'm going to refer to it as. That's what it is in my region. It could totally be different where you live. It could be in May or in July, maybe, if you live somewhere really cold. So this is the timing between your spring bulbs, like your tulips and your daffodils, which for me would bloom like late April. My daffodils right here. So they're going to bloom in mid to late April, and my tulips will bloom early-ish May, typically early to mid-May. So your bulbs are done, and then what? Well, thankfully, there's actually some strategic things that you can do to try and overcome this gap. And I've worked for the last 7 years, essentially, to try and build my farm overcoming this gap. Because the problem is, you get people really excited about your flower season and you get customers and it's springtime, and I feel like here in Michigan it's like insatiable desire for flowers. We've all been in the midst of, the cold winter, and everyone's ready for flowers and people are getting married, and then you don't have flowers. There's different ways to overcome this. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. One way that I'll touch on is having woody shrubs. This is definitely the long game, but this is something I've strategically added into my farm. So having things like viburnum that are spring blooming with the white flowers. I don't have a ton of those, but those are in my production. I have some maturing, so hopefully those will bloom. Spirea for us totally fills that June gap. Oh, flowering trees like cherry trees and some later flowering trees, they will bloom. Dogwoods will bloom during this time as well. So those can be really great. I'm actually still working on this. I'd like to get some flowering trees. So, I'm still refining this system myself. So that would be woody shrubs. The second thing to think about is perennials. And this is often what I hear people really talking about are the perennials to bridge this gap. And I agree with that. There are some really helpful perennials in this gap. There's a few things that I grow. I just kind of started growing them a long time ago, and I just have little sections of them that are kind of wild, not in my production field. So that would be things like lamb's ear and nepeta. And those really are very strategic for filling this gap. And so I still keep them around. I only sell them for 2 to 3 weeks out of the year, but they really fill this gap, and so I really like them and keep them around for that purpose. Another one is Solomon seal. That's a perennial. That's a foliage that's mature enough for me at this time and gives me some great foliage options to cut right at this time. So it can be really hard to have focal flowers during this time. So until you get to those peonies that we're all waiting for to bloom, and for me that's like late May, early June that we finally start to have our peonies, which I seem like I'm watching them and finally they'll bloom because we're kind of desperate for these focal flowers. So those are another really strategic part is peonies, because from there that's gonna bridge your focals to your summer flowers. Other things that I like to think about during this time, which last year I grew them for the first time, is foxglove, and they really bridge this gap. They were in my tunnel last spring. I also have them in my tunnel. They're right here actually this spring, but I have them in my field too. So I'm curious the timing of that and how that'll help me and how that's going to go, because I'm always looking to, stagger things and keep things going in spring. And another one kind of along the same lines as foxglove is delphinium. Those bloom in June for me as well. Other perennials would be yarrow will start to really pick up in June. So I'm always thankful when the yarrow starts blooming. So that's a really good one also. I like to stagger the yarrow planting and have yarrow that's going into its second or third year, and then also have a spring planted yarrow, because that will bloom for me a little later and give me multiple successions. Again, just helping have a more consistent supply of flowers as well. So another section here is cool flowers. So I actually brought a book with me. So this is an old book, kind of, or classic, maybe you would call this. Cool flowers. Let's see. I'm always curious here. Yeah, this is kind of an older gardening, flower farming book. It's copyrighted in 2014 actually, and I got my copy in 2020. I wrote the date in it, so that's kind of fun. And this was probably, I believe, my first gardening book that I ever bought. This is, of course, Lisa Mason Ziegler's Cool Flowers book. I believe I checked it out from the library as I was researching farming, and then decided, yes, I really could spend the whatever $20 on it to buy it, and that was, every penny counted. So I bought this book as one of my very first resources, and it has tremendously helped my farm, and I know a lot of other farmers as well. Many of you are probably familiar with Lisa Mason Ziegler. So this is her Cool Flowers book, and this is what really helped me strategically think about filling in this gap and how to really do it. Now, I'm in a very different zone than her. She's in the Tidewater, Virginia area, which, interestingly enough, I was stationed there when I was in the Air Force 17 years ago. I didn't know she existed then, but I actually lived very close to where she lived. And of course, I'm now in Michigan. So we have we're living in different zones, different growing seasons, and all different things. But the same principles apply. You just have to apply them to your own region. And there's a few things that I've tried and tweaked based on my own experience, of course. But this is just really a foundational book for this concept. You likely can get it from your library if you're looking to, get a copy of it free, inexpensively to borrow. Okay, so Lisa talks a lot about this. So there's several different strategic windows here. So there's a fall planting where your flowers will go through the whole winter. And yes, I live here in Michigan, and there is stuff hardy to my zone. Actually, there's quite a few things. So I like to direct seed in the fall, and then the next strategic planting is in the spring. I actually tried to direct seed on a week ago Saturday, and it just was too muddy and mucky yet, so I wasn't able to do it. So pretty much as soon as you can work the soil and get out there in the spring. So I like to have my beds basically prepped in the fall for this. I'm preparing for this, and then I can get in and sow. But obviously the ground has to be workable and not a muddy disaster, which it kind of is here, or was last week. So I'm really hoping to be able to plant them tomorrow, actually. So hopefully I can get them in. Sometimes I can get them in earlier and later. Just depends on the year. But there is still time to strategically plant these early spring cool flowers, which really do help bridge the gap. So the fall planting is typically going to give you like your biggest, tallest, most robust crops, because they just develop these amazing root systems and just become a stronger flower. They're just really great. So my fall planted Bupleurum is the most incredible Bupleurum ever. I had a florist tell me, like a veteran florist tell me, this is the most amazing Bupleurum I've ever seen in my entire life. There's just nothing compared to it. And it is a really big difference. My fall planted Bupleurum compared to my spring planted Bupleurum. My fall planted Bupleurum is like branchy and massive and tall, and the spring planted stuff is great. It's just not as amazing. Anyway, so you can still plant though for spring, and I'm still planting. So I love direct seeding things, and the cool flowers there's a lot of them that are really great for that. A lot of them work better direct seeding, like larkspur. Anybody tried to transplant larkspur and get it to germinate inside? It really almost has to be direct seeded, unless you're going to do some pretty Herculean things to get those seeds started, like put them outside when it's freezing at night and bring them inside during the day and put them out at night. I don't have time for that. So, but if you direct seed them, they typically germinate amazingly. At least for me, they have. So things on this list for me. So the things that I fall plant, they have to be hardy to your zone. So I'm in zone 6A in Michigan. So that basically just tells you how cold you will get, not how long your winter is. But for me, we're in zone 6A, although we used to be 5B, and I think our temperatures are more like 5B, especially after this winter. But anyhow, so I look for things that are hardy to zone 5 or 6. For example, in this book, she says Nigella is hardy to zone 6, And I tried fall planting it, and it was amazing. It did great. So Nigella really does really well in my climate over winter. I've never had a problem with it. And it's really amazing. They'll go through the winter, they'll be positively frozen, and they'll still be green. And then in the spring, they just emerge into growth right when the days start to lengthen and there's warmth. So there's just a lot of benefits to that. But if you miss that fall planting, there's still hope. You can still spring plant. I typically spring plant all the same crops again and direct seed again. There's also some other very strategic crops that I don't direct seed in this category. So the ones that I direct seed personally are in the fall that are hardy to my zone are Bupleurum, Orlea, Nigella, and Larkspur. It's not a very big list. And then the things that I direct seed in this spring are all those four again, Bupleurum, Orlea, Nigella, and Larkspur. And then I also add Saponaria, which is not really hardy to our zone. You might have a few that work, but I tried it. I tried overwintering them and they all died. Like 97% of them died. So, but they're a really great one and they're very fast growing. They will bloom in June, even when planted in the spring. So I add Saponaria and giant poppy pods. I actually think giant poppy pods are hardy because I see them and I tried planting some last fall. So we'll see if they come up, but they're pretty tough. So those are the ones I add. So this gives you a second wave of crops. It's actually really amazing because often your fall planted stuff will be done blooming and then your spring planted crop will come sometimes right on the heels of it, or there might be a little bit of a gap, but usually you're able to mostly go right from the other. Bupleurum always has a gap, or Leia pretty much like the fall planted crop is done and my spring planted stuff is there, and it, at least for the last several years, it's just been one from one to the next. So that's really lovely transition as well. Okay, there's a couple other plants there's a whole bunch of other plants that you could plant. You got to read this book if you want to know. But there's a couple other ones that I strategically plant in the fall, and that is Campanula. I plant that from plugs. I don't direct seed it. I have that in the field, and I also have it in my tunnel over there. And then the other one would be snapdragons. I don't fall plant snapdragons in the field anymore because I had so many die. I think there's a lot of variety dependence, like certain varieties are hardier than others. But so I have just been planting them in my tunnel now. But some years they work. It just depends. But if you're in a little bit warmer zone than me, snapdragons are also a really great one for that. So this is what's going to help you bridge this gap. These flowers are going to start blooming in the beginning of June and the middle of June and help you bridge the gap to your summer flowers. I have tried a bunch of other crops, and this is kind of what I've refined my list to for various reasons: simplicity, bed space, different things. So obviously another thing to fill that gap is having a high tunnel. I did not have a high tunnel till the end of my 5th season. Like I got it in August. So really for my 6th season of flower farming did I actually have crops in it. But clearly this whole place is planted, and this is my May and June plan, or obviously a part of it. But even without a high tunnel, I still was able to learn to bridge this gap using these different pieces. So you don't have to have a high tunnel to start to work to bridge this gap. Take heart. But if you're in the north, having a high tunnel will change your farm. One other tip is something that I do with my sunflowers. And this takes a bit more fussing, so you have to decide if the crop is worth it to you. But sunflowers, first of all, are probably hardier than you think. So their buds are not hardy, but they're not in bud in May. Well, okay, for me, they're not. Some of you have them blooming now. I know I have some friends in Arizona and she has sunflowers. So that's, I don't know, otherworldly to me. But for me, I do not have sunflowers in May. But one strategy that I implemented, inspired by Lisa, not from this book, but something Lisa said, was getting my sunflowers to bloom as early as I could. So what I did was I started them in the end of April, and then I planted them out in about May, beginning of May. Now they're not hardy. We're still getting frost. Hopefully we're not getting snow, but in theory we could. But I've never seen snow in May. Definitely in April though. So what you need to do is cover them with row cover, which you can see I have row cover daisy chained behind me. And so I have row cover, and you use these little hoops, and I cover my rows with row cover. And sometimes you can double the row cover. So this is Agribond or a frost cloth. This is Agribond 15. So I like to have that, and then I double the weight to get like Ag 30, Ag 45. You can triple it. I mean, I guess you could do more, but at some point, it's a little much. It is a little tricky to hold down in the wind, but I have been able to get sunflowers by the middle of June. I mean, people are like, how do you have sunflowers? How do you have sunflowers? It is really, if you can fuss with it, it really can help you. It can get you a couple of weeks earlier with sunflowers when you're sort of desperate for large focal flowers as well. Not everybody wants a peony. They're obviously more expensive than a sunflower, but it is a pretty easy, like, it's not a very big investment to try and get your sunflowers sooner. And I've done this several years and it's worked brilliantly. And in full honesty, last year I didn't do it because I had just had the tunnel for the first time and I just was so overwhelmed with spring tasks. I never got to it, but I definitely am going to try to this year. It really can be a really helpful thing. Get you a couple weeks earlier with your sunflowers for a pretty low risk. I mean, if you lose a couple hundred sunflowers, you're not losing tons of money, but the payoff can be substantial. And then if you're like me and you're selling to florists, then you're essentially the first to the market with sunflowers. And at least my brick and mortar florists love sunflowers. They buy them every week. They love them. So once there's a sunflower, oh, they're so excited. So it's a really great strategy. So even though June can be a tricky month, I last year and even going into this year, I'm so excited. I think June is just one of the positively most beautiful times on my flower farm. It's also a crazy busy time, but it is just everybody's hungry for flowers. There's so much beauty. There's so much just like life bursting forth. And it just feels like such a great sigh of relief to see all this bounty and blooms and beauty coming forth when it's just been, a long winter. So as certain things are kind of ending, new crops are starting. And so it just, you've got your things that have a very short bloom. So you've just got these really special flowers that bloom during this time, like lilacs or geum or virea. And so it just can be a really special time because when you have something that's so fleeting and so special, and you can only smell lilac for like a couple weeks out of the year, it just is a really, really special time. I've also recently added some roses. I'm not sure how much I'm going to really produce them, but last year in June, I was just blown away with them. And I have a climbing rose over a trellis just for my own personal enjoyment. And it was just so beautiful. And I'm starting to have some of these perennials come into year 3 and 4 and 5. And it's really just being able to see the fruit of your labor and the longevity of your plan, forward thinking, investing into the future. And it really is such a special time on the farm. And it it really is so beautiful and I really love it. So I would encourage you to think about this as an evolving process. Like, what cool flowers are really pulling their weight? Are bachelor buttons really worth it, or are they just a headache? Or are they giving you that early spring blue that you just can't get anywhere else? Stuff like that. So I've grown a whole bunch of different cool flowers, and that's just the list that I've refined to and added these perennials. So how can you get the whole picture and think about strategically how that could be on your farm? So I'd also love in the comments if you shared what works in your region, because I know people have different things blooming at different times in different regions and other things that are not hardy to me. Share in the comments. We can help each other figure out what might work best for us during this challenging gap time. If you enjoyed this video, check out this other video I did on direct seeding. It's a great time to direct seed in most places anyway, so that might help you understand how I do that and my process for making that simple and quick and very profitable in my opinion. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.